Welcome to Truth, Money, and Freedom. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. Hey, gang, this will probably be a slightly longer podcast. I'm going to try and connect some dots for you guys about finance and politics. And this is from being an observer of both for a very long time. And I'd like to just include some stories here that seem to be unrelated, but I'll help to connect the dots here. The first story here, how tech unicorns are just like China's ghost cities. Okay, let's start with unicorns. For those of you who don't know, that is a disparaging remark towards overvalued IPOs or initial public offerings on stocks for new companies. For instance, Uber, Lyft, things of that nature. There's been a lot of them that have come out literally in the last month or two, and they've been extremely overvalued. I mean, in the extreme in their IPO, and that is, like I said, a symptom of a larger problem, especially when they're all coming out at the same time. You know, if they're all spread out, I wouldn't actually be giving it much attention. But since they all kind of cram together in the same time period, it is interesting, and it is, like I said, a piece of the puzzle. But the story here is really talking about China's ghost cities. And since 2008, China has spent an enormous amount of their resources building up cities all over China. In fact, this article here even says, I believe it's 25 million, but it is an enormous. It's literally like 25% more housing than they need. That's pretty bad. That is that is beyond extreme. And even at the worst parts of the financial crisis here in the United States, I do believe there was only about 10% open stock. In other words, 10% vacant homes. They're looking at 20% over there in China. And they had the mentality, if you build it, they will come. People will move to China, being the economic powerhouse that it is, the political powerhouse it's becoming, that they would somehow magically, just start growing their population from the outside. People would want to move to China. This was not the case. Okay, hang on a second. An incredible 65 million empty apartments in China currently, which amounts to approximately a fifth of the country's housing stock. There it is. I told you, I've read the article. Um, this is pretty bad, gang, and they're going to pay for it. And I'll tell you what, this is going to sound extreme, but this is an extreme problem right here, a really extreme problem. This is going to sound extreme, but they need to burn these things. They need to knock them down or burn them or something. Otherwise, their housing market is going to fall in a very big way. In fact, I'm surprised it hasn't fallen. But then again, when you have an economy in China that is centrally managed, just like we have here in the United States, and they can just print money, that prevents these things from actually collapsing as they should because of the magic word today, misallocation. Misallocation. So let's talk about the business cycle for a second before we go to the next story. The business cycle we have here in America is generally 4 to 8 years. It usually falls in that range. We're currently in a 10th year of economic expansion here in the United States. And that is unprecedented. It's the longest one in the history of the United States. And how did we get there when we didn't solve the problems from 2008? Well, that's easy. Extremely low interest rates, unprecedentedly low interest rates, and a lot of money printing. So we consequently have inflation because of this, as well as misallocation. So when they put the band-aids of low interest rates and money printing on the gaping wound in our economy back in 2008, they actually were cutting open both sides of that gaping wound even further by literally printing money and lowering interest rates. They knew that that was a stopgap, that it wasn't going to solve the problem. They knew this because it's an unsolvable problem in the Keynesian economic, system. It's an unsolvable problem. You can't reel that money back in without destroying the stock market and the bond market. And by the way, the bond market will heal, so will the stock market. But this is what we've always done in the past, gang. When we have inflation, and by the way, let's go into the federal government lies, the Federal Reserve lies. You guys understand this, you know this. Maybe not even from me, just because you instinctively know there's just no way we have 2% inflation, it's 10%. John Williams of Shadow Stats has very, very good data on this. So they lie about inflation, and there's a lot of reasons why they lie about inflation. Number one, they don't want people upset. Number two, it allows corporations as well as the federal government to only have a 2% increase per year on your wages, 2% increase on Social Security. While people are wondering what the heck. Holy crap! 5 years ago I was able to go so much further with the money that I had. Now I can't go anywhere near as far anymore. Everything costs so much more. And that's everything, gang. I mean, everything from auto repairs to groceries to whatever. I mean, everything's going up. Now, the only thing that's enjoyed 2%, I've talked about it before, is textiles and electronics coming from China. So we can, say that that's the 2% right there. But that is a very small amount of what actually makes up our general economy, especially when you talk about healthcare going up. Healthcare, I believe, is 25% of our entire GDP. And the middle class is dying off because of healthcare costs. That is the number one thing they're saying that they can't keep up with is healthcare. Number one thing they're saying they can't keep up with. There are other things. For instance, they're now financing their groceries on credit cards. I've proven this in previous podcasts with other stories. So, okay. All right. So basically, we know the federal government lies about unemployment. They say it's 3.8%, but it's actually 21.3%. So the numbers are very skewed. They're trying to not have us panic and actually start saving or start paying off debt. That is why, if you ever asked, hey, TC, why is it they lie to us? That is the reason why. They don't want you paying off debt. That is deflationary. That hurts the system. They don't want you being aware, so you don't take on, or so you still continue to take on new debt. That's very important to keeping the system alive. So those are the two primary reasons why the government and the Federal Reserve are lying about our current economic status here in the United States of America. So there you have it. It's right there in a nutshell. Let's move on to the next story. And once again, I'm connecting dots, gang. Okay. Trump mulls Pentagon plan to deploy 10,000 troops to monitor Iran. I love how that's in quotes. Okay, this isn't a fact. This is a plan. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But let me talk about this for a little bit. Iran has not threatened us in any way, shape, or form. They have not threatened the United States. And the only thing they threaten is the central bank and the oil companies. Those are the only threats Iran poses, is to big corporations that are involved in energy production and the Federal Reserve. Let me explain how. Iran is selling their oil and they're taking payment of gold. They don't want the dollar. Now, that flies in the face of OPEC and what Saudi Arabia constantly pushes on others in OPEC. That's the deal we have with Saudi Arabia. Despite the fact they have, humanitarian issues like crazy out there, human issues, they really treat their own folk very, very badly. But we put up with that and we tolerate it because they're a very important part of keeping the dollar strong. So we allow them to persecute their own people for very stupid reasons in order to do that. Well, Iran is, once again, and I'm going to get into China here in a little bit here, even though I passed that story now. Iran is not doing anything to hurt us. They are selling oil with gold. So they're taking gold in exchange for oil. That hurts the dollar. So that hurts the central bank. That hurts the dollar paradigm, if you will, the world reserve currency. Well, you say that's an attack on the United States. Well, no, not really. They shouldn't have been forced to sell on the dollar. It's their oil. They should take whatever they want in payment for it. That's a libertarian idea. If you have goods and services you'd like to sell, you should be able to, take payment in the way that you want to take payment in. But also, too, they threaten, basically, I know that they've got their issues with Israel. And I still study that and look into it to see how real these issues are. But we have our, and I'm going to go back to Pence now. Pence literally was telling us a lie, and that's the Vice President Pence, telling us that not Israel, but Iran was sending state-sponsored terrorists known as Hezbollah into Venezuela, making us, basically well, we got to do something militarily to answer this. So we got to go into Venezuela. We got to go to Iran. I mean, there's been all kinds of crazy stories. Iran is trying to build a nuclear bomb. I've heard that for years. There's no direct evidence of this. And, well, they're refining, more and more uranium. Well, they have nuclear power plants there. So you have to have enriched uranium and yellowcake in order to, build these isolinear rods. So, I mean, that's what they do. But there's no proof that they're building nuclear bombs at this point. So there was talk from John Bolton saying that basically there was a plan of Iranians to actually attack American soldiers and American interests in Iraq. And that has turned out not to be the case, or at least not provable at this point. And then we had another story, and once again, I'm just going into the lies, gang. Another story, we had satellite footage evidence that Iran was moving missiles in Iraq and in Syria, of all places. But it was Iranian-controlled convoys or something. We've heard enough. I mean, we know that we're over 18 years old. We accept the fact that the the corporations, the energy companies, and the central bank are the ones who are being hurt by actions in Iran. The American people are not. So this is why we're constantly irritating Iran. And by the way, I do not approve. I mean, literally, we just need to pull out of the Middle East. We just need to pull out. If we need their oil, then we pay the price for their oil, but we need to stop messing with them. Because there will be blowback for this at some point, gang, and it ain't going to be pretty. And we continually do it. We've been doing it for a long, long time, and the CIA is entrenched in the Middle East, I'm sure, like crazy. Okay, let's move on to the next part. The Dow dumps 400 points, and it's still going down. Let's go take a look here. 414 down 414, NASDAQ down 154, S&P down 46. Once again, this is an illusion, gang. So I don't really care about the numbers, but I do care about the up and down activity because it usually tells me something's going on. So, but here's the really crazy one here. The 10-year yield down to 2.31% or down 3.64%. And here's the other unusual one. Oil is down despite all the tensions with Iran. So nothing makes sense anymore, right? It doesn't. In fact, look at this. The dollar's being attacked right now by Iran and by others, including China, through trade war going on, which is actually a currency war. But look at gold and silver. They just refuse to go up. And that is part of this as well, which is manipulation of the precious metals through their derivatives and the paper markets, the future markets. So nothing makes sense because everything is controlled now. And I mean totally controlled. That's what we refer to when we say we have a centrally planned economy. There is no free market here. I mean, this is literally controlled. And if you can control it, you can definitely determine who the beneficiaries are of the control. So the middle class is being culled, and once again, and I will go through the reasons again really quickly. Number one is the cost of medicine, hospitalization, pharmaceuticals, all that fun stuff. The middle class are saying those are killing them. They're absolutely killing them. I talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and he is dealing with that. He's struggling with that, and I pray for him. Because the medical costs are just exorbitant. He's still working on it. He's still working on paying them, but they're just huge, and it's taking a lot of his money to actually do this. Well, it's not only that, but look at the middle class. They're putting groceries on credit cards, and they're paying interest. They're carrying balances. They're paying interest. So this whole thing is flying apart, gang. The middle class is really taking the brunt of this, as they always do. The fact that the government lies about, unemployment, they lie about inflation, it's just par for the course. Once again, they have to kind of keep the illusion alive as long as possible so they and their buddies can benefit. And that's what they're doing. These guys are your enemies. And I'm talking about the politicians in Washington, D.C. They lie about everything because they're not done getting the biggest slice of pie they could possibly get out of the system before it collapses. That's what that's about. So we're connecting dots between politics and finance. And by the way, it doesn't matter what party. Republicans, Democrats, they all do this. They all do this. That's why, for instance, you see someone get elected to be a representative, and they go in and they're middle class or upper middle class, and they come out 20 years later, and they've got 50, 60 million dollars in their bank account. I mean, how on earth did they do that? Oh, it's because of book sales and speeches. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's because of their dealings. And once again, we're talking about pork barrel projects that are passed through Washington, D.C. in bills all the time, many of them earmarks or riders. And what that means is, guys, because the mainstream media is not talking about pork barrel anymore, doesn't mean they're still there. They're always there. They continue to be there. And they're a giant, enormous financial burden on the people of this country. Many of those deals that are done by the federal government are extremely costly to the American people because there's no bidding involved. There's no free market forces involved. These are like no bid contracts for whatever for tanks, and the company charges 300-400% more than it actually costs to build the tank to the federal government. So it's incredibly profitable for those companies, but it's also very, 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 very profitable for the senator or representatives involved in making the deal. So there's always money in it for them as well. Guys, that's just the way things work in the world. So in basically, in lieu of trying to connect dots here for you, gang, politics and finance are inextricably linked. Now, the reason we see so much corruption and it's so bold and in your face right now is because the system is collapsing. And when I say the system is collapsing, what I mean is the dollar, along with the dollar hegemony, along with the central bank's control and the federal government's control, because the very, very weak excuses we use to be aggressive with nations around the world are so pathetic anymore. They're very laughable. You can see right through them, and nobody seems to care. They know nobody cares anymore. So they tend to say these things and get away with them. Like the one where Mike Pence said Hezbollah was coming to Venezuela, apparently to go ahead and terrorize the starving people of Venezuela. I think he meant to say that it was going to be a foothold because of the confusion there under martial law. Foothold so they can start getting in through our southern border. Well, gang, I got news for you. We have a whole lot more than Mexicans coming through that southern border. And I mean, we have drug trafficking like crazy, human trafficking like crazy. That includes the child trafficking. We have, I think, sleeper cells probably, basically people who really truly hate us coming through that southern border as well, slipping through. And the border, the southern, or the Border Patrol has reported on this. They actually have to carry statistics on how many people are coming through and what countries they're coming from. They're overwhelmed. As you know, they're actually taking busloads of these immigrants to sanctuary cities now, which is very ironic because they're the ones who are trying so hard to make sure that we keep that southern border open, but they're not very happy with the immigrants coming to their cities. But at the same time, I reserve judgment on this because I don't think the Republicans want the border closed either. They say they do, but they know there's not enough support to get it done. So they're placating their base by saying they want the border closed, knowing that it will never happen. So, guys, see how this politics and finance is interlinked? Drug trafficking through the southern border? Well, there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of money in drug trafficking. Human trafficking? Well, we know the numbers on that. Currently, it's about a $150 billion per year business on human trafficking. There's money involved in not closing that border. If you close the border, and if you slow the process in which these things can happen, it will also cut off the flow of money for these nefarious operations, being black market through drugs, human trafficking, and indeed allowing all kinds of unwanted dissidents coming into our nation, going into hiding and waiting for whatever they need to wait for until a time of, or an event or whatever before they start causing mischief all over the country. We will, basically, and that's another thing too. If you want to talk about the sovereignty of the United States of America, sovereignty is defined by three things, and that's border, language, and culture. all of which have been infiltrated by the worst aspects of humanity. Um, and I can go into that. That goes into philosophy and morality and values, and possibly even to religion. That's a bigger conversation. I probably shouldn't have started here right now. But this is the end of our empire. It's crumbling. And I think most people can feel it. And we're going to get into another conversation very soon about this as well. On a subconscious level, I think most people know this. And that's why so many people are on antidepressants, taking painkillers, anti-anxiety medications, because they feel something is horribly, horribly wrong, but they don't know what it is. They instinctively know things are not the way they should be. And we'll get into a larger conversation with that, hopefully with Turtle in our Discord group, Truth, Money, and Freedom. Okay, in order to come full circle here, wild swings in the stock market. You didn't see these things happen, 10, 20 years ago. 450, 700, even 1,000 point swings. That's a new thing now. And that is now the norm. That is normal now. Because, like I said, there's an enormous amount of new money sloshing around the system. And I suspect more money is being added all the time through a secondary balance sheet at the Federal Reserve. I can't prove that, so I'm not going to say it's a fact, but I do think it is happening. I suspect money is also going into bonds from that secret fund by the Federal Reserve. Oil is coming down right now, which is very interesting. It's good for us Americans, but it's not good for the oil-producing nations. And the dollar is supposedly hurting against other currencies. And the Chinese yuan is 6.91. I'm going to keep a close eye on that now with this trade war. Because, like I said, I really do think it's coming down to a currency war. Here's the deal, gang. China, Iran, and other countries are going to start challenging the United States. They're going to start challenging us all the time. Not necessarily militarily, but on the financial side, because we are weakening. The empire is beginning to crumble, and they know it, despite the fact that our media is telling us the empire is just fine. And the empire has never been stronger. But we know instinctively this economy since 2008 has benefited very few of us Americans. It's only the top people. We're talking about the captains of industry, boards of directors, politicians, big business. They're the beneficiaries, not you and I. We're not having a slice of that premium blueberry pie. In fact, we're barely getting any crumbs from the pie plate. And this is the way things end. This is the way it ends. So basically, that's why I've been giving advice the way I have with gold, silver, crypto, paying off debt, having storable food. And we may do a podcast in the very near future with Patriot Pantry, which is a place where I go to get my storable food. I really do like those folks. They do a great job. And but it's some things that you guys need to think about if you haven't been thinking about it. There's other ways to get storable food as well, so that's not the only way to get the 25-year shelf life stuff. But I want you guys to consider thinking about this stuff now, because things are just so out of balance and so crazy anymore. Nothing actually makes sense anymore. And it makes me wonder if we're getting really close to when the dollar's just going to start coming down. Now, I can predict that's already going to happen because food and because China, the trade war with China. So we're going to have inflation in those two things. And I think that people will definitely see that right away. We've had inflation in those areas anyway, but with Chinese goods, the inflation's been very low on, like I said, electronics and clothing. So now we get to see it in other areas as well. So just food for thought. I really, I want to talk more about this paradigm. And I know I tend to ravel on some of these podcasts and everything, but it's really important to understand this right-left paradigm. The right-left paradigm is literally for brainwashed masses. The Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats. Yes, they do differ in a few different areas, in a few select areas, and we can talk about those someday. But in areas of finance, do we see the border closing? No, we don't, because there's too much money in keeping the border open. And they don't care what it costs in human lives, in human suffering. They don't care. These are your politicians. I've told you they're psychopaths and sociopaths. They don't care about the human suffering. They just don't. So please understand that. That's why we don't have a border closing, because the psychopaths and sociopaths in Washington are making money from keeping the border open. The CIA makes a lot of money through keeping the border open. Of course they're not going to close it. They're not going to do anything to close it. They may make, a gesture here and there. I hear that there's now officially 20 miles of new fence. And this is 2.5 years after Trump came into office. That's a very pathetic show. Very pathetic. Nothing to be proud of here. Nothing to announce to the people there. It's just absolutely pathetic. Border, language, culture. That's how we keep our sovereignty. We're losing all of it. We have people come into this country that refuse to learn language, so we have to learn theirs. We have people just coming through the borders, like crazy. There's nothing stopping them. And Border Patrol is so overwhelmed now, they're just releasing them into sanctuary cities. And I know a lot of people think that's just hatred from Trump towards those sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. And it may be. I'm not sure. It is ironic, that they're all being dropped off there. But at the same time, they're being dropped off in our country. It is a concern for all of us. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what their intentions are, other than they intend to literally come in and, become, a part of the system here. Are they going on welfare? Are they getting jobs? We don't know. There's no way to track this stuff anymore, and they just dump them off. And then culture. Our culture is constantly under attack in every way you can imagine, and everyone knows it. For instance, Disney. I've talked about Disney and what they've done with, their franchises, their movie franchises. I've talked about this, where they're incorporating a lot of values that are, social justice warrior values, feminist values, into movies today, and trying to literally minimize the role of men in society, making them dumb, stupid, aggressive. Um, you know, um, so we see this happening in a lot of the movies. Why can't we all be the same? Why can't men and women be equally important, and equally powerful, and equally good, role models in movies? Well, that's not what Disney wants, apparently. They want men to have very minimized roles and women to have all the powerful roles and all the smart roles, because they solve the problems. Men are part of the problem, so we need to deal with that. So I could, by the way, I'm just beginning. I mean, we talk about the inclusion of just, okay, let me go with sexually transmitted diseases. We're having an epidemic in this country with that. Not to mention diseases coming across the border, which are not necessarily sexually transmitted diseases. So we have basically plagues spreading across the United States because of the problems of not closing the border and with encouraging sexual, activities, especially with young people. And that's also celebrated in Hollywood. I mean, that's always there. We can talk about, kids being disobedient with their parents, being lazy, not wanting to work, not wanting to participate in the system, not wanting to, basically even help out their neighbors is just a kind, human gesture. Can I help you? Hey, Mrs. Robertson. Hey, I noticed that your garden needs a little bit of work. Would you mind if I came over there and did a little bit of weeding for you? We don't have that in America anymore. That just doesn't happen. And when kids want to do, or when kids do something for other people, they expect to be paid. So we have no charity. So the charitable nature was a very important part and a very important experience in the American culture, where people cared about one another. They were willing to help one another. They actually gave up their time to help other people. And that's gone now as well. Is it because of selfishness, or because everyone's too busy on electronic devices, or what is it? I'm not really sure, but I know it doesn't feel right. So, but at any rate, I've gone too long with this one anyway. But I just wanted to connect the dots here between politics and finance, gang. And the stuff that's going on with Iran and China, I will continue reporting on this, because this could blow up into something big. Notice how Venezuela is not in the news anymore, and it's all China and Iran. And let's see if one of them falls by the wayside and we start talking about Venezuela again, or another nation. Because once again, it's all about keeping the dollar strong. That's the only thing that matters, and it doesn't matter how many people we have to kill to do it. It's more important to the central banks and big businesses to make sure that their energy prices stay up and that the dollar remains strong. That's all that matters. We're hitting the end of the empire, folks. So they're brazen now. They're bold and they're naked in their movements now to protect their interests. So just kind of sit back and watch the show. You know how George Carlin once said, if you're born into this world, you have a ticket to the freak show, a free ticket to the freak show. But if you're born in America, you get a front row seat. Nothing could be absolutely more certain than that. Look at the crazy crap we're doing, gang. Okay, that's it for now. I will continue doing podcasts where and when I can. I'm very busy with work, so don't worry if you see several days have gone by and I haven't done a podcast. New ones will be coming. You guys all take care. May God bless you all. Have a great day.